All right, everybody. I'm Patricia Traina, New York Giants on SI. I'm with Brandon Olsen. We are here at New York Giants, and we just finished up with OTA number 2. The Giants were on the field for close to 2 hours, and Brandon, obviously all eyes were on the quarterback. Let's start there with the quarterback, what you saw, what you observed.
It was definitely great to see Jackson Dart look comfortable enough to move. I feel like a lot of rookies, you see them kind of just try to stick to the playbook, try to not deviate too much, and Jackson Dart was moving around, scrambling, making throws on the run. Russell Wilson, everybody knew that when he came here, he would have a commanding presence, and he had just that. You know, he walked through, he kept the offense moving, he kept things on schedule, on target, on task. And Jameis Winston looked like he was having a blast out there, had a few times where he was moving around, getting some throws out. The energy's clearly there when he's on the field. One tip drill pick in the end zone, but hard to fault a guy for a tip drill pick too much. But overall, quarterbacks looked how they looked, and we kind of anticipated that, I think, with a lot of them.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you know, some guys, a big storyline for the Giants, which guys are injured, who was doing what. Andrew Thomas was held out. Andrew Thomas, of course, recovering from the Liz Frank injury, but Theo Johnson was back in, and he was doing drills, and he looked, quite honestly, he looked like, you know, he didn't have the injury.
Yeah.
Exactly. Also held out of practice was Malik Neighbors due to a toe issue. Now, this toe issue, Brian Dable said, was going on back in college for Neighbors. It popped up a few times last year on the injury report, but Neighbors, they were playing safe with him. So in his place, Jalen Hyatt actually got a lot of reps with the first team. And how did you think he did?
I thought he looked well. For him, he was always someone coming out of Tennessee that he was going to need at least a year or two. Great athletic traits, but someone who played in, I want to say, more simplified than a high school offense when he was at Tennessee. So it usually takes those guys a couple years. He looks like he's coming into his own a little bit. Route running looks cleaner than it did last year. And if he could play with just some semblance of consistency, then he's going to have a role in this offense.
Now, of course, we also heard from several players after the practice. Bobby Okereke talking about how his back injury that landed him on IR last year, how it was scary, and how at one point he couldn't even sit. It was that painful. But Bobby Okereke running around with a renewed sense of vigor. He looked a lot more comfortable. Granted, you know, it's still early, but Bobby Okereke looks like he's having fun again. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and he was someone who also, in the post-practice session, he mentioned that comfort being in year 2 of the defensive system is big. He hasn't had 2 years with the same DC for quite some time now throughout his career. I think he said since his second year with the Colts. So it's been quite some time for him, but he looks comfortable, he looks confident, and I mean, if he's moving like old Bobby Okereke, then he's going to have a great time behind this defensive line.
And then another thing I found interesting in the media session, Greg Van Roten, when I asked him about the transition Evan Neal is facing from playing tackle to guard. Now, Greg Van Roten never played tackle, but he also dispelled a common misconception a lot of us have, and that is that life is easier in the phone booth.
Yeah, I loved when you brought that up, he actually, when he responded, he was like, well, if you're facing a static defense, it's really easy to play guard, which I do think is where a lot of people got their whole guards aren't valued position right now. But like he also mentioned, no defense is static anymore. Everything's always moving. And so it actually might be more complex just intellectually with what you have to do as a guard as opposed to anything else tackle.
OTA's number 2 is in the books. The Giants are off on Thursday. They're back at it on Friday. The next time the media is back in the building is a week from Thursday for OTA number 6. Make sure you keep it here on New York Giants on SI for all the updates. Whenever we're here, we'll have a report for you.